talk about trademarks here, okay, and the different things that go on with trademarks. So first, it's a mark, on what's produced to represent the origin of goods and or services. Okay. It's got to be recognizable, distinctive. It's a protection against any kind of confusion, right? If you see the swoop, you know exactly what that is. Okay, you're not confused. Or if you see the Adidas, you know the difference between Adidas and the swoop. Okay. Just something to think about. If you were blindfolded and spun around and taken someplace and they took the blindfold off and you were in a national fast food chain or a national retailer, would you recognize it just by the stuff that's in there, even if the names had all been removed, but all you saw were, like the golden arches or something like that? Yeah, you would. I mean, odds are you'd know, unless you've been living in a cave, you'd know, right? Okay, so trademarks came about, the Lanham Act of 1946. There is a registration process. Okay, they have to be recognizable, distinctive. There are types. The trademarks are the familiar ones that we're kind of used to. Northern's little kind of L thing there that we got going on, the triple L, let's call it, is trademarked to my knowledge. Okay, a service mark would be something that applies to a company that has services as opposed to goods, and Allstate is one that I guess I've used as an example. You're in good hands with Allstate, okay, and that could be trademarked, that saying, okay. Certification marks are things like the Underwriters Laboratory and Energy Star might be a more recent one, Underwriters UL. If you looked at a lot of old extension cords and things like that, they had the UL on them because they'd been tested by the Underwriters Laboratories and they had certain certification. Okay. Collective mark would be things like MLB, right? And their little logo, it's a collection of teams, but they've kind of come together. And that could be, group of independent banks, or the National Federation of Independent Businesses, different things like that, groups and whatnot could create collective marks, that you might, the Better Business Bureau, maybe, you put that on your door because you've been, certified as being a great business by the Better Business Bureau. Trade dress, well, could we, how about a color? I mean, could we have trademark just a color? Well, I'll say 3 words, and I think you'll understand that, yes, you can. How about John Deere green? For those of us that live up in these parts, that's kind of distinctive, that color, right? This obviously would be a logo, a trademark, but the color itself is trademark. It's trade dress, but it's protected. Okay, then you might be able to go down to Sherwin-Williams and buy a gallon of John Deere green paint, but odds are John Deere's going to get a little bit of money out of that deal. They might get a few cents per gallon. So the product has to be used in interstate commerce, and again, remember how broadly defined that is. So it's pretty simple. Can't be the same or similar to another mark, and I often tell the story here about Moose Drool, which was created by Big Sky Brewing Company. It was, one of the early craft brews, and it was a small, just a local beer that people were enjoying, but it started to get popular, and they started to distribute it, and as it grew, then all of a sudden they were met with a legal challenge from a company, a brewery up in Canada that brewed a beer called Moose Head, and Moose Head thought that Moose Drool was too close, and so they sued them, and long story short, they ended up settling. To my knowledge, the settlement was that Moose Drool, or Big Sky Brewing, agreed not to market Moose Drool past east of the Mississippi, because Moose Head was primarily in the eastern part of Canada, and they distributed it in the northeast part of the U.S. as well. We used to see Moose Head around here, but you just don't anymore. I'm not even sure Moose Head hardly exists anymore as a beer. Can't be merely descriptive, so it has to be more defined. Like the swoop or something, not generic. We can't trademark generic items. Milk. you can't trade milk or trademark milk, or things like that. Not prohibited or reserved name. I think that has to do with names. If somebody has a name, you can't really trademark that necessarily, unless that name, like McDonald's, becomes a part of that business or whatever. Notice there is an official gazette where those things are filed, and you have to renew it every 10 years, and you have to stay on it. I'm sure that those big companies with those major trademark things, they've got lots of reminders setting up there. So, secondary meaning, a public meaning that's different from its meaning as a person's name or a descriptive term. I'm going to pause for a second here. All right, I kind of wanted to go back one little bit because I had kind of not been as close on this. The reserved, not prohibited or reserved name, there are certain things like the American flag, that can't be trademarked. Certain items like that cannot be trademarked. And what they are, there's a list of them, I'm sure, at the trademark registration place, whatever that is. So, secondary meaning, a public meaning is different. And so, what that says is that a lot of things have become that maybe started out as names. Levi Strauss. When we say Levi's, we think of a pair of jeans now, right? And the book gives you some other examples of things that have become, totally associated with the product as opposed to the original name of the person. Enforcement, okay, there's civil violations. So just like the lawsuit that I told you, that was civil, right? That was Moosehead suing Moose Drool. It actually would have been the corporate name, so it wouldn't have been Moosehead. It would have been whatever company brews Moosehead suing Big Sky Brewing, right? Remedies can be these, right? Damages, injunctions, destruction of the products, etc. Criminal violation, right? There can be for intentionally counterfeit products. So if you're intentionally doing it, the long arm of the law might step in. Dilution, okay? May use a mark the same as or similar to a famous trademark. So some of these things become diluted over time. I kind of this says may not use a mark, and I use that Moose Drool. I'm sorry. The Moose Drool versus the Moosehead example. That they said Moose Drool. They sued anyhow, and they said that Moose Drool was too close to Moosehead. You and I would find that very distinctive. I can tell you now, probably 20 years later, this same lawsuit wouldn't have been filed. There's so many craft brews now, and part of their thing is to come up with innovative names. And, even if there's other names that are trademarked, it'd just be so hard to pin it down and say, you're violating somebody else's trademark. And that's kind of what the dilution means, right? The significance of some of these, the significance of Moosehead has been diluted a bunch, right? But you don't have to show that there's public confusion in order to claim, that there is some similarity, right? Okay, but I think it'd still be harder to press a case like that, kind of my opinion. Let's stop there and then we'll come back and do copyrights.